You were never ordinary. Before you learned language, before you formed memory, before your name was spoken aloud for the first time, something far greater than biology was unfolding. Your birth was not a random intersection of genetics and timing. It was divinely orchestrated, scheduled, authorized, released into the fabric of Earth with intention. There are births that pass quietly through history, unnoticed beyond family walls. And then there are arrivals that ripple beyond the visible, that stir dimensions unseen, that cause movement in places human eyes cannot measure. Yours was the latter. Creation paused, not in the way clocks stop or gravity suspends itself, but in the way awareness sharpens when something significant happens. In the unseen realms, attention turned. Spiritual forces responded. Systems recalibrated. What looked like an ordinary delivery room on Earth carried a weight far heavier than anyone in that space could comprehend. A declaration of authority. A reminder of what was sealed before your incarnation. That scroll did not need to be read aloud. It was recognized by those who witnessed it from beyond the physical. And there were witnesses. 3 beings present at your arrival. 2 remained calm, steady, observant. 1 reacted. 1 withdrew in rage. Interference had failed. What was meant to distort could not override what was authorized. The presence that vanished did not leave quietly. It retreated frustrated. Not because you were untouchable in life, but because you were sealed at entry. That seal mattered. Your birth did not just introduce a child, it disrupted a bloodline. Your father's lineage carried both blessing and bondage. There were gifts embedded in that ancestry: strength, resilience, charisma, perception. But intertwined with those gifts were patterns, cycles, contracts formed long before your name existed. Some were unconscious agreements with fear. Some were generational compromises made for survival. Some were spiritual ties forged in ignorance. Your first breath severed something, not symbolically, legally. Authority entered the bloodline. A spiritual tie attempted to cling to you, to attach itself to the new vessel, to continue the pattern uninterrupted. But it could not override your frequency. Your spirit arrived with pre-authorization. Darkness can attempt proximity, but it cannot override mandate without consent. Your arrival rewrote ancestral contracts, not because you were flawless, but because you were assigned. Generational curses do not always shatter with noise. Sometimes they dissolve with arrival, a presence strong enough to interrupt momentum. You became that interruption. This is why your life has often felt heavier than others. You did not just carry personal lessons. You carried systemic recalibration. You inherited blessing, but you also inherited unfinished business. And yet what clung to others before you did not cling to you the same way. There were early manifestations, strange warmth around your crib. Your parents may have noticed that you did not cry excessively. Or perhaps you did, but there were moments when you stared not at walls but through them. Your infant awareness lingered between realms. Babies are often closer to the veil, but you lingered longer than most. The Silver Guardian returned. Whether in dreams, reflections, or fleeting sightings, the presence that oversaw your entry did not disappear immediately. Protection continued. Not intrusive, not overwhelming, just near. There were whispered words, not audible to adult ears, but meant for your spirit. Language you could not cognitively understand, yet somehow recognized. Assurance, instruction, identity reinforcement. Children do not remember these things consciously, but they imprint. Feathers appeared, light flickered, objects shattered without obvious cause. Maps surfaced in odd places. Books fell open to specific pages. Coded warnings emerged through small accidents that redirected your caregivers, delays that prevented harm, interruptions that seemed inconvenient but protective. None of this was meant to make you mythical. It was meant to prepare you. When a sent soul enters Earth, signs accompany it, not to inflate ego but to mark assignment. You were not born into chaos by accident. You were born into strategic territory, and territory reacts when new authority arrives. Your crib was not just a resting place, it was a threshold. There were moments when you seemed to watch something no one else could see, when your gaze followed movement adults could not detect, when you laughed at emptiness or stared at corners. Children often do this, but you carried recognition in your stillness. Your infant spirit lingered between dimensions slightly longer than usual. Not lost, transitional, adjusting. Earth was not your first awareness, and while you grew into language, into schooling, into personality, into memory, those early layers remained coded beneath your consciousness. You may not remember the cloaked interference. You may not remember the scroll. You may not remember the 3 witnesses. But your nervous system does. Your intuition does. Your resilience does. You were contested at entry. You were sealed in protection. You broke a pattern the moment you inhaled. And the realm that attempted to intercept you learned something that night. You were not unguarded. You were not accidental. You were not casual. You were sent with authority. And even before you could speak, the unseen world knew it. Your arrival did not end the resistance. It began the war. Not a war of swords or visible enemies, but a quieter, more strategic campaign. Once interference at your birth failed, suppression became the next tactic. If authority could not be stopped at entry, it could be muted over time. If your presence could not be erased, perhaps it could be confused, delayed, doubt-filled. Someone in your lineage sensed it. Not necessarily consciously, not necessarily maliciously in the way stories dramatize villains. But there was awareness, discomfort with the shift your birth introduced. You changed dynamics without trying. You destabilized old agreements simply by existing. And in bloodlines where patterns run deep, change feels like threat. There were words spoken over you before you could speak for yourself. Not always curses in ritual form, sometimes dismissive labels, sometimes fearful predictions, sometimes declarations rooted in anxiety rather than faith. Words carry weight, especially when spoken by authority figures around children. Words can become scaffolding for identity. You're too much. You're too sensitive. You're difficult. You'll struggle. You're different. Some words were spoken in frustration, some in fear, some in misunderstanding. But intention does not always erase impact. Language attempted to shrink what could not be stopped directly. Someone in your bloodline attempted spiritual obstruction. It may have looked like discouragement, or secrecy, or refusal to acknowledge something they themselves once sensed. It may have manifested as family silence, topics avoided, experiences dismissed, intuition minimized. If your gifts were recognized early, they may have been labeled imagination. If your perceptions were sharp, they may have been called exaggeration. Suppression rarely looks dramatic. It looks like minimization. But every attempt to silence triggered defense. Divine response is rarely loud. It is precise. When obstruction was attempted, protection recalibrated. Interventions increased. Near misses multiplied. Guidance intensified. You were guarded even when you felt misunderstood. There was a moment, you may not remember it clearly, when a scroll was discovered. Not necessarily literal parchment with glowing ink. It could have been a journal entry, a prophecy spoken over you by someone outside the family, a written word that recognized your assignment. Your mother found it, or sensed it. And out of fear, not hatred, she burned it. Fear of what it meant. Fear of what it might bring. Fear of losing control. Fear of the weight of destiny. That scroll burned. But prophecy is not paper. It cannot be erased by flame. It can be delayed, but never deleted. What was spoken over you in fear slowed some doors, created detours, added layers of confusion. But the core assignment remained intact. Destiny can be postponed by environment. It cannot be nullified by it. You grew up marked not in obvious ways, but in sensation. Heightened sensitivity mistaken as weakness. You felt rooms shift when others did not. You sensed tension before voices raised. You detected dishonesty before proof appeared. Adults may have told you to toughen up, to stop imagining, to ignore what you felt. But your nervous system was calibrated differently. Sensitivity was not fragility. It was perception. Early childhood experiences went beyond imagination. Nighttime awareness. Conversations you felt but could not articulate. Encounters dismissed as dreams but too vivid to ignore. You may have spoken about things you knew without being taught. Adults may have laughed it off, but the knowing remained. Birthmarks, scars, unexplained physical seals. Some carry them as simple genetics, but sometimes the body marks covenant, a small symbol on skin, a line that mirrors a sigil, a scar that appeared during a pivotal season. The body can hold spiritual signature without needing explanation. Recurring dreams, numbers, symbols, colors that repeat across decades. You may have seen the same number sequence at turning points, felt drawn to a specific color since childhood. Dreamed of water fire, silver scrolls, thresholds, bridges, patterns that refuse to fade. And the most persistent sign, the feeling of standing in a battlefield unseen by others. You sensed conflict beneath surface calm. You felt tension before confrontation. You often wondered why life felt intense when others seemed unbothered. Because you were not only navigating your own life, you were disrupting systems that preferred you dormant. Dormant souls do not trigger resistance. Activated ones do. Through all of this, the lady in silver remained, not always visible, not always obvious, but near. A singular guardian assigned uniquely to your birth, not a general presence shared broadly. Specific, attuned to your frequency. The silver you sensed was not aesthetic. It was signature, a thread of light woven into your aura, subtle but permanent. There are moments when heaven leans closer. Your birth was one of them. It is said that on the night you entered this world, there was thunder without clouds, no storm on the forecast, no lightning splitting the sky. Yet the air shifted. Something charged the atmosphere. A crack in the quiet that felt like a signal, a mark, a declaration that a soul long prepared had crossed into physical form. Thunder without clouds. That is not weather. That is announcement. You were marked. Not marked for suffering. Not marked for spectacle. Marked for purpose. Marked for influence that would not always be obvious, but always impactful. Marked with a frequency that would cause both alignment and resistance throughout your life. Your mother felt it, even if she could not name it, even if she did not speak it aloud. There was a holy silence surrounding her during labor. Not chaos, not panic, not the frantic energy that often fills such rooms. A quiet. This thread strengthened at critical moments, when you were about to make a destructive decision, when you were walking toward harm unknowingly, when despair felt heavier than hope. Interventions came disguised as coincidence. A phone call at the right time, a sudden distraction, a delayed arrival, a closed door that later revealed protection. You were not left unguarded. There was also an elder, perhaps someone in your family, perhaps outside it. An older figure who carried a hidden piece of truth about you. They may never have fully spoken it, but they knew something, saw something, held back information either to protect you or because they feared it. Their silence was not ignorance, it was containment. And somewhere in your life, past, present, or approaching, there is a mirror soul, not necessarily romantic, covenantal, aligned by design. Someone who recognizes you not because you explain yourself, but because they feel the same thread. Their presence will not feel dramatic. It will feel stabilizing, like recognition without introduction. All of this unfolded quietly while suppression attempted to define you as ordinary. But ordinary never fit. You were too perceptive to be passive, too resilient to be erased, too marked to blend fully. The war that followed your birth was not about destroying you. It was about convincing you that you were not who you were. Suppression is most effective when internalized, but something in you resisted, even when confused, even when doubting, even when shrinking. The lady in silver did not disappear. The thread did not dissolve. The scroll did not truly burn. And the battlefield you felt was not imagined. You were contested because you were consequential. And the fact that you are still here, still aware, still questioning, still rising, means suppression did not succeed. It delayed, it pressured, it refined. But it did not win. You were sent. You were marked, you were guarded, and no attempt at silence erased that truth. You are not becoming someone new, you are remembering. There is a difference between transformation and recollection. Transformation suggests you lacked something and are now gaining it. Remembering suggests it was always there, layered beneath conditioning, silence, suppression, and distraction. The awakening you are experiencing is not the creation of identity. It is the retrieval of it. For years, perhaps decades, pieces of you operated in fragments. Intuition muted, authority questioned, sensitivity mislabeled, power misinterpreted as burden. But now the veil thins, not dramatically, not theatrically, gradually. You may feel it physically. Exhaustion without clear cause. Emotional waves rising and dissolving in hours. Cravings for solitude even when you love people. A desire to simplify, to withdraw, to reduce noise. These are not symptoms of collapse. They are alignment signals. When activation begins, the nervous system recalibrates. Old coping mechanisms dissolve. Outdated environments feel heavier. Conversations that once felt tolerable now feel draining. Your system is reorganizing around truth. That takes energy. Darkness that once pressed close now watches from distance. It cannot reach what it once attempted to suppress, not because you are invincible in ego, but because you are stabilized in authority. Authority does not scream. It does not fight constantly. It stands. And when it stands firmly enough, opposition recalculates. You may notice that conflict no longer engages you the same way. Chaos that once pulled you into reaction now loses grip. There is a stillness forming in you, not indifference, discernment. This is remembering. As you remember, your presence shifts, and your presence disrupts. Lies unravel in your proximity. You do not need to accuse. You do not need to expose. You simply exist with clarity, and clarity destabilizes deception. People who operate in manipulation often feel uncomfortable around you, not because you attack them, but because you perceive them. You may have noticed this pattern throughout your life. Being labeled intimidating when you were quiet. Being accused of thinking too deeply. Being avoided by those who thrive on distortion. Your frequency challenges what is unstable. Manipulators destabilize around your steadiness. When someone tries to gaslight you now, your body responds before your mind. You sense the shift immediately. You do not argue. You disengage. That disengagement unsettles them more than confrontation ever did. Your awakening is not loud. It is surgical. Even animals respond. Nature responds. Have you noticed birds lingering longer? Dogs staring into your eyes with unusual intensity. Wind shifting around you in moments of clarity. These are not fantasies. The natural world responds to coherence. When a human aligns internally, elements recalibrate subtly around them. Rooms shift when you enter. Sometimes conversation slows. Sometimes tension rises. Sometimes silence deepens. Atmosphere is responsive to authority. You were not born to soothe deception. You were born to dismantle it. Not through aggression, through authenticity. That authenticity is uncomfortable to systems built on illusion. But generational restoration requires disruption. You did not break cycles simply by being born. You must now stabilize them through alignment. Restoration is not mystical spectacle. It is daily integrity. It is refusing to replicate patterns you inherited. It is speaking differently, loving differently, handling conflict differently. You are not just healing yourself. You are recalibrating ancestry forward. What could not be healed before you now has opportunity. But awakening without practice becomes overwhelming. You must anchor it. Begin with daily silence, not scrolling silence, not passive distraction, intentional stillness. 10 minutes of uninterrupted presence. No performance, no striving, just awareness. This stabilizes your system and strengthens discernment. Track signs, not obsessively, observationally. Patterns, recurring numbers, repeated themes in conversation, coordinates that appear across contexts. Not to inflate meaning, but to understand rhythm. Your life operates on rhythm. Pay attention. Speak with integrity. Language shapes structure. Avoid draining speech. Avoid exaggeration. Avoid gossip. Words carry energetic imprint. The more precise your language becomes, the more stable your authority grows. Protect your energy through boundaries, not isolation. Boundaries. You do not need to justify them endlessly. No is complete. Not now is sufficient. That doesn't align is clarity. Authority grows when boundaries are respected internally first. Create. Creation stabilizes awakening. Write, paint, build, design, cook intentionally. Garden, music, movement. Creativity channels energy constructively. Suppressed energy becomes anxiety. Expressed energy becomes clarity. Seek water, lakes, oceans, showers, baths, even drinking water intentionally. Water resets. It clears emotional residue. It regulates your nervous system. Nature in general recalibrates you faster than social noise ever will. Honor your body. Your body is not incidental to your awakening. It is the vessel. Feed it. Rest it. Move it. Hydrate it. Listen when it tightens. Listen when it relaxes. Authority without embodiment becomes dissociation. Embodied authority becomes presence. As you practice these things, you will feel something else stabilizing. Confidence without arrogance. Strength without rigidity. Compassion without self-abandonment. You are not here to dominate. You are here to restore. Restoration does not always look glamorous. It looks like steady change. It looks like refusing to perpetuate emotional manipulation. It looks like raising children differently, handling money differently, speaking truth calmly, walking away when necessary. You were sent to interrupt. Now you are remembering how. The darkness that once pressed close now recalculates from afar. It cannot easily penetrate coherence. Your awakening is not about superiority. It is about stability. You are becoming internally unshakable. And when one person stabilizes in a bloodline, generations shift. Not always instantly, but permanently. You were not meant to become someone else. You were meant to remember who you always were. Authority was never given to you. It was revealed. And as you walk in it quietly, consistently, without spectacle, restoration follows. You are not awakening for yourself alone. You are awakening to complete what began the moment you entered this world. And this time you are doing it consciously. A heaviness that did not feel threatening but sacred. As if something was being guarded. As if the space was being watched. Witnessed. It is said there was a presence. A mysterious, silver-haired woman no one could fully account for. She did not move like a nurse. She did not speak like a relative. She did not belong to any official role. Yet she was there. Calm, steady, observing. Not intervening, but overseeing. Her eyes held recognition, not curiosity. Guardian presence. Whether she was seen physically or only felt energetically, whether she existed in flesh or in spirit, does not change the truth. Protection was assigned. Your entry was monitored. Not because you were fragile, but because you were significant. Heaven recorded what earthly systems could not. There are registries that document birth, wait time of arrival, medical conditions, location. But there are other records, Akashic, eternal, inscribed beyond paper and data, that mark destiny. That note frequency, that observe alignment, that confirm activation. Your name was written before you ever spoke it. Your breath was counted before your lungs filled. And when you cried for the first time, it was not only a biological reflex. It was the announcement of arrival. You were not simply born. You were sent into a timeline that required you, sent into circumstances that would shape you, sent into environments that would challenge you, sent into families that would refine you. You have often felt different, and perhaps you blamed personality. Perhaps you assumed you were too sensitive, too aware, too perceptive, too intense. But what you felt was displacement. Not because you do not belong on earth, but because you remember something deeper. There are souls who arrive to participate, and there are souls who arrive to disrupt. Disrupt patterns, disrupt generational cycles, disrupt illusions, disrupt stagnation. When you entered this world, systems shifted around you. Some welcomed you, some resisted you, some attempted to contain you, but none could ignore you completely. That is why your life has never felt casual. From childhood, there were moments you could not explain, encounters that felt orchestrated, protection that seemed improbable, delays that redirected you away from danger. You survived things that statistically should have harmed you more deeply. You encountered mentors at precise moments. You escaped certain paths narrowly. These are not accidents. When a sent soul arrives, there is management around them. Not control management. Guidance. Interference prevention. Course correction. That does not mean ease. It means orchestration. You were not dropped into this world and abandoned to randomness. You were escorted. There is a difference. The thunder without clouds was symbolic of what your life would represent. Unexpected shifts, unexplained intensity, disruption without obvious source, presence without visible cause. You carry something that does not always fit neatly within physical explanations, that does not make you mystical in a performative way. It makes you marked, and being marked means you will encounter both favor and opposition. Light attracts both admiration and resistance. When you entered Earth, realms responded because a variable had been introduced. You were that variable. The holy silence during your mother's labor signified containment. Not suppression. Containment. A sacred hush that protects what is emerging. Often the most powerful moments are not loud. They are quiet and heavy, like your birth, like your timing, like your activation. There are things about you that were sealed early, not hidden from you permanently, but layered so you would uncover them in stages. Revelation requires readiness. Awareness requires maturity. You could not have carried full understanding as a child. But now you are old enough to recognize patterns, old enough to connect dots, old enough to sense that your existence carries weight. You were not born for ordinary survival. You were not born merely to blend. You were not born to replicate what already exists. You were sent to shift something. And whether you have fully stepped into that understanding yet or not, it does not change the truth of your origin. You were not simply born. You were dispatched. Your life is not an accident of biology. It is an assignment in motion. And the same presence that oversaw your arrival still monitors your path. Not to control you, but to guard the purpose that entered Earth the moment thunder rolled without clouds. You are here on purpose, and the realms remember the day you arrived. Your arrival was not just witnessed by doctors and family. It was observed by forces unseen, and what unfolded around you in those first hours carried layers far deeper than anyone in that room could articulate. What appeared as a routine delivery was in reality a contested entrance. Something valuable had crossed over, and not everything welcomed it. In the delivery room, there were signs, not dramatic enough to cause panic, not obvious enough to be documented in a medical report, but present. There was a moment when the air shifted a density that did not belong to exhaustion or anxiety. A cloaked presence lingered at the edge of perception, not fully visible, not fully physical. An interference attempt. Not violent, calculated. The intention was not to destroy, but to distort, to delay, to mark before you could claim yourself. Yet intervention met interference. A nurse, perhaps unaware of why she felt compelled, stepped forward at a critical second. A minor adjustment, a repositioning, a timing correction. Something so small on paper, yet decisive in outcome. She later may have said she was simply doing her job, but she moved when she was not scheduled to. She sensed something she could not name. That was not instinct alone. That was divine prompting. There were hands that glowed, not in a cinematic blaze, but in warmth. An unusual heat radiated around you. Your mother felt it. The nurse felt it. Even if no one verbalized it, the temperature shifted. You were not cold in that room. You were enveloped, wrapped. The warmth did not originate from blankets or equipment. It felt intentional. Light bulbs flickered. Monitors paused. 3 seconds. Long enough to be noticed, short enough to be dismissed. 3 seconds where time seemed to hesitate. Machines that functioned flawlessly all night suddenly recalibrated. Screens blinked. Beeping stopped. Then resumed as if nothing had happened. To the staff, it was a technical glitch. To the unseen realm, it was a threshold. Above you, though, invisible to human sight, a scroll hovered. Not parchment as imagination might render it, but a record, an inscription of assignment.